When I walked into the apartment complex, I knew something was wrong before I even made it to the door. It wasn't a sound. There wasn't any sound. No TV muffled through thin walls. No neighbor yelling at a kid to get inside. No bass thumping from someone's weekend speakers. Just this odd, vacuum-sealed quiet, like the whole building was holding its breath. Dory's place was on the second floor, down a corridor that always smelled faintly like laundry detergent and old carpet. I remember the texture of the railing under my palm as I climbed the stairs, sticky, sun-warmed metal, and the way my stomach tightened with every step, because I hadn't been there in a week, because I didn't want to be there, because her mother had called me the night before and said something that didn't fit inside my brain no matter how many times I replayed it. "I have Sam," she had said, voice thin and shaking. "Dory has been taken to Bellevue." I'd actually laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it didn't compute. Bellevue was one of those names adults said with a warning baked into it. A place you didn't go unless something had cracked so loudly the whole world could hear it. "Taken?" I'd repeated. "Please," she said, and I could hear someone talking in the background, a man maybe, low and urgent. "If you have anything of yours there, anything at all, you should get it now. Before the landlord, just do it now." I didn't sleep. I lay on a stranger's couch, someone's cousin's friend's living room, the kind of place where nobody asked your last name and nobody wanted your story. And I watched as the ceiling went from dark to gray to pale morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sam's face. Sam was 3, maybe 4, round cheeks, hair that never stayed brushed, a smile that could make you forget for half a second that the world could be cruel. And I kept thinking, where is he sleeping tonight? Who is making sure he eats? Who is holding his hand across the parking lot? So when the sun finally came up, I put on my only decent jeans, shoved my hair into a messy knot, and walked back to the place I'd promised myself I was done with. I told myself I was going for my stuff, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was I needed to see it. I needed proof that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. Dory, the couch, the half-friendship, the way her eyes always looked like they were scanning the room for danger even when nothing was there. I needed to understand how a life could go from unstable but manageable to gone, like a chair kicked out from under it. I reached her door, and that's when I stopped breathing. Everything was literally everywhere. Clothes were strewn on every surface like someone had shaken out a closet and let the garments fall where they may. Furniture was overturned, an end table on its side, one leg snapped clean off like a bone. There were holes punched in the walls, not small ones either, big, angry craters. Pictures hung crooked, frames cracked. And right there, across the living room floor, was the one photo Dave had taken of me and given me for my birthday. He'd put it in a nice frame like we were normal people, like I was a girl who got gifts and had a future. The glass was shattered. The frame was split. My face stared up at me from the carpet in pieces. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, frozen, trying to decide whether this was the kind of scene where you stepped in or the kind where you backed away slowly and ran. I stepped in anyway. Because I was 15 and stubborn and hungry for answers. Because I didn't know how to be safe yet. Because some part of me still believed that if I did everything right, the world would reward me with stability. It didn't, not then, but it would later, not all at once, just enough to keep going. I met Dory at a party where the music was too loud and the cups were too cheap and everyone acted like they belonged somewhere. I was working at Kmart, saving crumpled bills and trying to pretend I wasn't scared all the time. I was under 18, which meant the world had 1 million locked doors, and every adult behind those doors had the same look. Not my problem. At that party, someone handed me a beer. I took one sip and made a face. Ugh, I said, loud enough for the guy who offered it to look personally offended. From across the room, a girl laughed. Thank you, she called, raising her own cup like a toast. Finally, someone honest. That was Dory. She had dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and eyes that were too bright, like she'd had too much coffee or not enough sleep. She moved like she was powered by nerves instead of muscle, fast, jittery, always half a second from a reaction. We ended up on a ratty couch near the back of the apartment, away from the speakers. We bonded over the taste of beer, which to both of us seemed like something you endured to prove you were tough. We weren't into enduring things for no reason. And we bonded over the other thing, the thing that felt like a shortcut to calm when you didn't have a calm life to begin with. Mind alteration of the smoking kind. It was the early 80s, and nobody spoke about mental health like it was a real thing. You were either fine or you were crazy, and those were the only two options. So people self-medicated and called it partying. People smoothed their edges in any way they could and pretended it was normal. Dory and I talked like we'd known each other longer than an hour. That's what happens when you meet someone who recognizes the same kind of restlessness in you. It's like finding someone who speaks your language in a room full of strangers. At some point, she mentioned she had a son. His name's Sam, she said, and the way her voice softened on his name made me sit up straighter. He's my whole heart. She told me she needed to run errands sometimes, grocery store, laundry, things she couldn't do easily with a little kid in tow. And she asked if I'd ever babysit. Just for an hour or two, she said. I'll pay you. I can't ask my mom for everything, you know? Extra money was always needed. I said yes before she finished the sentence. 2 days later, I was in her one-bedroom apartment, sitting on the couch with Sam while he lined up toy cars in precise rows and narrated their lives with the intensity of a tiny movie director. This one's the police, he told me, pushing a blue car forward. He's looking for the bad guy. Who's the bad guy? I asked. Sam looked up, dead serious. He's hiding. I remember smiling then, but something in my chest tightened anyway. Because kids know. They don't have the vocabulary, but they have the radar. Dory moved around the apartment like she was always cleaning, always fixing, always organizing. But no matter how many times she straightened a stack of papers or wiped down a countertop that was already clean, the air around her stayed tense, like a rubber band stretched too tight. I watched her with Sam and saw the love absolutely. She was affectionate, playful, constantly checking that he was okay. But I also saw the flicker behind her eyes, a kind of constant vigilance, like she was waiting for the next bad thing to happen. After a couple of weeks, once she trusted me, she asked why I looked so tired all the time. I told her the truth. I was looking for a place to stay. I said it like it was casual, like it didn't matter. But of course it mattered. I wasn't 18, I didn't have money for deposits and leases and proof of income and all the things adults demanded before they'd let you sleep indoors. I didn't have parents to co-sign anything. I didn't have a safety net. I had a paycheck from Kmart, a couple of pairs of jeans, and a stubborn refusal to go back to the places that had hurt me. Dory leaned against the kitchen counter thinking. "We've got the couch," she said finally. "It's not perfect, but if you chip in a little, it could help both of us." My heart leapt so fast it actually hurt. A couch wasn't a home, but it was a consistent place to put your shoes, a place where you knew what the door sounded like when it opened, a place you could leave a toothbrush without it disappearing. I tried to play it cool. "That could work," I said, like I wasn't about to cry from relief. So I moved in, if you can call it moving in when everything you own fits into a couple of bags. At first, it felt like the perfect solution. I worked during the day. I came home tired and counted out a few bills for Dory. I played cards with Sam on the living room carpet. We watched TV in the evenings with the volume low so Sam could sleep. For a few weeks, it almost felt normal. And then, like a hairline crack in glass, the weirdness started to spread. Dory told me about her husband one night while Sam slept in the bedroom. We were sitting in the dim living room, the only light coming from the kitchen. Dory was smoking and staring at the wall like it was a screen only she could see. He was in the Navy, she said. I nodded, careful not to interrupt. They said he fell overboard, she continued. Drown. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the only thing I could. I'm sorry. Dory's laugh was sharp and humorless. Officially, that's the story, she said. And then she told me the rest. She said she'd gotten a letter from him, a letter that sounded like fear dressed up as duty. He'd written about bad business on the ship, things that weren't right, things he was going to report to the higher-ups. He said he was going to do the right thing, Dory whispered. And then the next communication she received was the letter that starts with, "We regret to inform you." Dory insisted her husband was an excellent swimmer. She said he wouldn't have panicked. She said men didn't just disappear like that unless someone helped them disappear. I remember sitting there, my skin prickling. Not because I knew whether her suspicions were true, but because I could hear the way those suspicions had taken root inside her and grown into something that didn't leave room for peace. It wasn't just grief. It was a story her mind replayed on a loop, each time with sharper teeth. And I realized something important. Dory wasn't just sad. Dory was haunted. I liked her. I really did. She could be funny, warm, generous. She loved her kid fiercely. But there was always something a bit off, like she was balancing on a narrow ledge and the wind kept gusting. Sometimes she'd snap over small things. The dishes, the noise outside, the way someone looked at her in the parking lot. Then she'd apologize too quickly, too intensely, like she was trying to glue herself back together with words. I told myself it was stress. Single mom, grief, money. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself a lot of things. And then she brought home the other girl. At first, the girl was just there. A new friend from another party. Loud laugh, heavy eyeliner, the kind of confidence that filled up a room. She flopped onto the couch like she owned it and talked to Dory like they'd known each other forever. I didn't love it, but I didn't panic. People came and went. That was normal in my world. Then I started coming home from work and finding her wearing my clothes. The first time, I honestly thought I was mistaken. I walked into the living room and there she was in my shirt. My shirt, the one I'd bought with my own money and that fit me just right. I stared. "Oh," she said, like it was nothing. "Dory said I could borrow it." I looked at Dory. Dory shrugged, smiling too brightly. "I didn't think you'd mind," she said. "You've got good taste." I wanted to be easygoing. I wanted to be the kind of person who didn't make a big deal out of things. I wanted to keep my couch. So I swallowed it. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. But then it kept happening. My jeans, my sweater, my hairbrush. And then my clothes started coming back with stains, smudges of makeup, cigarette burns near the hem, something sticky on the sleeve. I finally said something, quietly, politely, trying not to trigger Dory's stretched out rubber band tension. "Hey," I said one evening, standing in the kitchen with my stained shirt in my hand. "Can we not let her borrow my stuff? It's getting ruined." The air changed instantly. Dory's face hardened. "Are you serious right now?" she snapped. I blinked. "I'm not trying to—" "You're acting like I'm doing you some kind of favor," she said, voice rising. "You sleep on my couch. You eat my food sometimes. And you're going to be stingy over a shirt?" It hit me like cold water. Oh, this was the turn. This was the part where the deal stopped being a deal and started being a weapon. I felt my throat tighten. I pay you, I said more quietly. I chip in, like we agreed. Dory's laugh was sharp again. Yeah, she said, and what would you do without me? There it was. Not friendship, leverage. The other girl smirked from the couch like she was enjoying the show. Sam padded out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes, drawn by the raised voices. And that's when I knew I was done. Because I'd lived through enough chaos to recognize the smell of it before it set the whole house on fire. I knelt down to Sam, forced my face into a smile. Hey, buddy, I said softly. Go back to bed, okay? He looked at me, confused. Are you mad? He asked. No, I lied. I'm just tired. He nodded slowly, like he didn't believe me, and went back to the room. Dory watched him go, breathing hard, then turned back to me with eyes that didn't match her face. You're ungrateful, she said. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was just learning. I didn't argue, I didn't fight, and I didn't throw insults. I packed what I could into my bags that night and left. Not dramatically, not with a big speech, just gone. I crashed on a different couch, another temporary landing spot, another set of strangers who didn't ask too many questions. I told myself I'd go back for the rest of my things later, when Dory cooled off. I told myself Sam would be fine. I told myself I was doing the right thing. And then, a week later, the phone rang. It was Dory's mother. I barely knew her. I'd seen her once or twice, stiff and tired, the kind of woman who had learned to keep her emotions packed away tight. Her voice on the phone was not packed tight. It was frayed. I have Sam, she said, and I could hear the tremor. He's safe, but where's Dory? I asked, even though I think I already knew. A pause, like she had to swallow something bitter. Bellevue, she said. They took her last night. My mouth went dry. What happened? Her mother exhaled shakily. She brought some girl around, she said, like the word girl tasted like dirt. They were fighting, screaming. It got out of control. Neighbors called people, and then she stopped, started again. They ended up in the pool, she said, and Dory was trying to baptize her, like she was saving her, like she was cleansing her. I felt dizzy. She had some kind of mask on, her mother added, voice cracking. I don't even know where she got it. She looked like someone else. I pressed my free hand to my forehead. And Sam? He was there, her mother whispered. He saw too much. My stomach flipped. Listen, her mother said, voice sharpening with urgency. If you have anything in that apartment, you need to get it now. We're handling what we can, but we're done. Do you understand me? We're done. Done with Dory, she meant. Done with the mess. Done with anyone connected to it. And I couldn't blame her, not really. After we hung up, I sat on the stranger's couch staring at the wall, my hands shaking. Then I got up and walked back. Which brings me back to the doorway, to the silence, to the chaos, to the broken photo of me on the floor like proof that I'd once believed in something steady. Inside, the apartment looked like a storm had been trapped in a room and made to rage. Curtains were ripped from the windows. The rods hung at weird angles like broken arms. One of the kitchen chairs was smashed, splinters scattered across the linoleum. There were dark marks on the walls, scuffs, smears, something that might have been makeup or might have been something worse. My first instinct was to call out Dory's name. I didn't, because my second instinct, the smarter one, reminded me, she's not here. And if she was here, it might not be safe. So I moved slowly, stepping around debris, listening to the building's hush like it might suddenly turn into footsteps. My stuff was mostly gone. My bags had been rummaged through. The drawer where I'd kept a few folded shirts was empty. My toiletries were gone too, like someone had decided even my cheap shampoo was theirs now. I found one sock under the couch. One. Just one, like a joke. I found a paperback book with the cover bent and water damage on the bottom edge, like it had been dropped near the pool or thrown into a sink and forgotten. I found my hairbrush with teeth missing. And then, in the corner near the TV stand, I saw something that made me go cold. Sam's little toy cars. The blue police car was upside down. The bad guy car was missing a wheel. They were scattered across the carpet like the story had been interrupted mid-chase and never finished. My throat tightened. I crouched down and gathered them into my hands, one by one, like picking up pieces of a tiny life. And that's when I heard it. A soft sound. Not footsteps, more like a shift, a creak. I froze, cars clutched in my palms. The apartment wasn't empty. My heart started hammering so hard I thought it might shake my ribs loose. I stood slowly, turning toward the hallway. "Hello?" I called, voice thin. No answer. Another creak. It came from the bedroom. I didn't want to go down that hallway. Every instinct screamed no, but something pulled me forward anyway. I took one step, then another. The bedroom door was half open, hanging crooked on its hinges like it had been kicked. I pushed it gently with my fingertips. Inside, Sam's bed was messy, blankets twisted. The small dresser was open, drawers yanked out like someone had been searching for something in a hurry. The closet door had a crack down the middle. And on the floor, near the dresser, was the mask. It was cheap, plastic, the kind you'd buy around Halloween. The kind that should have been silly. In that room, it wasn't. It looked like a face someone had put on when they couldn't stand being themselves anymore. I swallowed hard, looking around. "Is someone here?" I asked again. Nothing. No movement, no answer. Just the heavy, dead feeling of a place where something bad had happened and the air hadn't caught up yet. I backed out of the bedroom, not turning my back on it, heart pounding. I didn't search anymore after that. I didn't want to know what else I might find. I gathered what few belongings I could, shoved them into a bag, and walked out. At the top of the stairs, I stopped. I looked back at that door one last time, and I realized I wasn't looking for my stuff. I was looking for Sam. I was looking for some sign that he'd be okay. But all I had were the toy cars in my bag and a sick, hollow question that would follow me for years. What happens to a kid when the adults around him fall apart? I never heard from Dory again. Her family cut contact with everyone who had been in her life up to then. They were shocked, exhausted, ashamed, maybe all of the above. They disappeared like they were trying to outrun a fire. I couldn't blame them. I also couldn't stop thinking about Sam. Because Sam wasn't a story. He was a little human being who loved cars and asked if I was mad when voices got loud. He was the one who'd be carrying that night in his little body long after the adults forgot the details. For a long time, I carried it too. I carried guilt because I'd left. I carried fear because I'd stayed as long as I did. I carried anger because the world was full of doors that wouldn't open for people who needed help. And I carried something else, too. A tiny, stubborn hope that refused to die. Because here's the thing I learned later, the thing nobody tells you when you're young and scrambling for a place to sleep. Kids can survive more than you think. Not without scars, not without help, but they can survive. Years after that apartment, Years after Kmart and couches and the constant feeling of being one bad day away from nowhere, I ran into someone at a grocery store. Not Dory, someone else. A woman with tired eyes and a familiar way of holding herself tight. It took me a second to place her. Dory's mother. Or maybe not her, maybe an aunt? Someone in that orbit. She was older, the lines around her mouth were deeper, but the eyes were the same. I almost didn't say anything. I almost walked right past, because what do you say after years of silence? But the question had lived in my chest too long. So I swallowed and stepped closer. "Excuse me," I said softly. I knew Dory a long time ago." Her head snapped up like she'd been struck. For a second, her face went hard. Then it softened, just a fraction. "You were the girl on the couch," she said, voice flat. I nodded, my throat tight. "I've thought about Sam," I said. "A lot. I hope he's okay." She stared at me for a long moment, and then, like she was choosing her words carefully, she said, "He's okay." The breath that left my body felt like it had been trapped for a decade. "He lives with my sister," she continued, quieter now. "He did for a while, anyway. He got stable. School, sports, friends. Her voice faltered, and she cleared her throat. "He's grown now." I blinked hard because my eyes suddenly burned. Does he remember?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "He remembers enough," she said. "But he also remembers people who were kind to him." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know if I deserved to be included in kind when I'd left. But she looked at me then, really looked, and her eyes were not accusing. They were tired. Human. "He asked about you once," she said. "He wondered where you went." My chest ached. "I didn't know how to stay," I admitted. "I was a kid too." She nodded, like that was the first honest thing anyone had said in years. "Yeah," she said, "you were." We stood there in the fluorescent grocery store aisle, surrounded by cereal boxes and canned soup, like two people sharing a secret grief. Then she gave me a small, strange smile. "He's all right," she said again, firmer this time. "He made it." And I realized something right there between the cornflakes and the instant coffee. Hope doesn't always look like a perfect ending. Sometimes hope is just the fact that someone survived. Sometimes hope is the quiet miracle of a kid growing up. Sometimes hope is hearing the words, "He's okay," when you've been holding your breath for years. I went home that night and sat on my bed, my own bed, in my own room, a thing I never would have believed I'd have back then. And I took Sam's toy cars out of the little box I'd kept them in all those years. Yes, I kept them. I don't know why. Maybe as penance. Maybe as proof. Maybe because I needed something solid to hold on to when everything else felt like it could disappear. I lined them up on the blanket like he used to. Police car. Bad guy car. A couple others I'd collected along the way, because life always adds pieces whether you ask it to or not. And for the first time in a long time, the story in my head didn't end in chaos. It ended in motion. It ended in a kid who made it out. It ended in a small truth that felt like a light turning on in a dark room. Even when things fall apart, they don't always stay broken forever. If you're listening to this and any part of it feels familiar, if you're dealing with chaos at home, couch surfing, or you're scared you might hurt yourself, or you just don't know what to do next, you don't have to handle it alone. If you're in the U.S., you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 24/7. If you're in immediate danger, call 911. And if you're outside the U.S., please look up your local crisis hotline or emergency number. There is help, and you deserve support. And hey, if this story held your attention, or if you're following along with these chapters of my life that was messy, real, and sometimes hard to survive, please hit like. It helps more than you think. And if you want more of the stories of my life, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.